beautifuls. You're listening to Bliss and Grit. I'm Vanessa Scotto, and I'll be joined soon by my dear friend and co-host, Brooke Thomas. On the show, we're talking about being on the embodied spiritual path. What does that actually mean? What is a real evolution of our lives? How do we ultimately embrace everything? All the beauty and crazy, the joys and the messes, the bliss and the grit that is a human life. And we'll be attempting to sort that out for ourselves right here on the show. We're always so glad you're listening in. In today's episode, we're talking about what I playfully call the bubble of pain, aka a circular pattern of self-referencing that leaves us feeling at the center of a very painful reality. Now, many of us have felt how much it hurts to take things personally. Yet it seems even after recognizing the cost, we still find ourselves stuck, habitually believing that everything is about us, and oftentimes about how we're not enough. We're sharing lots of personal experiences and ideas about how we get stuck in our own bubbles of pain, and more importantly, maybe how we can become more available and free. If you're enjoying the show, we'd be totally delighted if you left a review on iTunes or on our Facebook page, which is Bliss and Grit. You can also head over to blissandgrit.com and subscribe to hear updates on upcoming events that we have on the way. And we actually have what sounds like it'll be like a master series where you can join us in conversation post episodes coming soon. So go ahead and get on that list if that sounds interesting. One last note before we head into the conversation, just in case you're new, Brooke and I do have potty mouths, so if there are kids around, you may feel it's right to pop some headphones in. Okay, here we go. Oh, hello, Brooke, dear.
Hello, my dear.
Okay, well, I have no idea how these words are going to come out of my mouth today.
It's always the best way to go.
But we're going to begin somewhere. Just going to begin. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to one of my clients who happens to also listen to the show. And I was explaining to her this concept that I kind of came up with, honestly, for myself years ago, trying to understand my own pain and how I showed up in relationship. And I call it the narcissistic bubble of pain. And as I was breaking down the narcissistic bubble of pain to her, she was like, oh my God, you have to do a Bliss and Grit episode on this.
Okay, well, Shazam.
So booyah. All right, the narcissistic bubble of pain. I guess the terminology sort of like reveals me a little bit about my own like hard on myself thing, because I had to call it narcissistic because it has shock value. So I guess what it boiled down to is we all have this way of what Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche called self-referencing. So, okay, let me bring it back. I'm in my late 20s. I'm in my early 30s. And I'm doing this thing in relationship to people, probably easiest for me to see in relationship to my ex-husband, where everything that's happening is somehow about me, right? Like taking it personally would be one kind of easy way to say it. But it's like, let's say someone doesn't call me back. It must be about me. What did I do? What have I done? How come no one likes me? Why don't I have friends? Or I don't know, maybe my ex-husband didn't do something for Valentine's Day that I might have fantasized he'd do. And what haven't I done? Am I not sexy enough? Am I not lovable enough? Did I not give enough? Right. And so how I kind of conceptualized of it is like we have this bubble. I see it like a beautiful soap bubble. It's very thin and it's kind of like porous, but it surrounds us. And within it is all of our painful belief systems. I'm not enough. I'm not lovable enough. No one will ever care about me the way I need. I won't get my needs met. And they bounce around in the bubble, kind of like it's like an echo chamber. And so it's always this like self-referencing and looping back, like, oh, I didn't do good enough. And then I'm like, no, fuck you. You're an asshole. You didn't do. And then I'm like, but you don't. And I'm never gonna, and I'm always with an asshole. And it's always still me. And then I almost feel like as information comes from the outside and it passes through the bubble, it becomes about me. So the information from the outside could have been neutral data, but it's always like getting translated as if someone was like throwing an apple, but as it passed the barrier, it becomes an orange.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Right?
Yes.
See what I'm saying? Like, and even I could see it recently in another one of my clients, like she was just giving an example. It was just like, oh, someone had said to her, wow, I could see you being an excellent healthcare professional. You're so, and the way she took it was they didn't see her as excellent in her current profession. And then maybe she's failing and, all of these things. And when her and I looked at it, we're like, oh my God. Or they meant, you're such a caring, empathetic person. And as that apple got tossed through her own pain body, it came out like a clementine, and she doesn't love clementine.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
So did I give enough information for you to respond to this? Is this making sense?
It is making great sense. I'm glad we're doing an episode on it. I still have zero idea what I'm going to say, but I think this is super important. And I have certainly been attending a lot to the concept of identity and how we identify, which is a part of this conversation. And so it's like one of the things you're getting at, like I see it as two, everyone loves a bullet point list, right? Two identifiers that allow the bubble to stay in place. Like the first big one is I'm a person.
Oh no. We got here.
Shit. And then the other one, which is not as large as that, it's smaller. It's a closer ring in, closer to us.
Okay.
Is I'm a person who is lacking something.
Mm-hmm.
And so it always gets translated into a narrative of I'm not sexy enough. I'm not empathetic enough. They don't think that I'm working hard enough because I'm not doing enough. Am I not doing enough? Why didn't my friends call me back? Am I not likable enough? So there's two layers. I don't know how much we'll get into the I'm an individual person, but
well, I mean, it's the basis of Buddhism.
Exactly, right. Like we're not this individual person that we identify as. Like we are and we're not, right? So nothing's all one way. We are and we're not. So we have these collections of stories and experiences, and then we have all of our family lineages collections of stories and experiences, which they have like their bubble. We passed through their bubbles and got imprinted with what their bubble was imprinted with. And then we formed our own bubble based on our own narratives and our own experiences, which is obviously colored by their bubbles. But it all relies on this larger concept that like, I am my stories. I am my experiences. I am what my parents said I was. I am what my family tree is, like I'm a branch of it over here and our family tree is this kind of a shape. And so I'm that kind of a shape. And the like, I'm a person, I'm not a person is a very big one to let go of. And it gets conceptualized all over the place. So I guess that's what I'm trying to say when I say I don't know how much we're going to get into. I don't want to just take a big
vomit up theorems.
Yeah, exactly.
Hypotheses.
It's not what I want to do because it's not the kind of thing that can be conceived of. Like lots of really beautiful teachers have pointed at this and continue to, and we're pointing at it too. But at the end of the day, it's like at a certain point, you just shed enough layers that you start to get these little glimpses of like, oh my God, like it's just a collection of thoughts and experiences, none of which are happening right now. Holy shit. Which can pop the bubble, right? Like, because suddenly you're not always self-referencing. You're not always pointing everything back at yourself. And it doesn't need to line up and make sense along your narrative, So the example you gave of the, nothing for Valentine's Day, right? Like the narrative you have is not enough. Like I'm not.
Well, if I was loved, someone would.
Right.
And then he would get me and then I would feel, right? So it's like expectation after expectation after
Exactly.
expectation.
Yeah. So maybe expectation is a better word and a good word to dig into for this, because that's where the filter goes automatically. I'm not enough because.
It is expectation and it is attachment. So from a Buddhist concept, we get this higher level of, as Brooke says, I'm not a person, am I a person? Am I not a person? Which they would just say is attachment to your individual ego, right? As opposed to recognizing interconnectedness, that we're interconnected and that things are naturally and spontaneously arising. But from that more simplistic level that you talked about not enough, that one seems to be really juicy and like something easy to dig into and relate to from my own life experience, because I guess what happens is somewhere inside you feel deficient, not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy. And you basically spend all of your ego energy, all of your bandwidth trying to shore up that you are enough. Right. And that's almost what creates that self-referencing bubble. I use the word narcissism, not because you're grandiose, but because you keep self-reflecting.
Yeah.
It's all a self-reflecting process. That's why they use self-referencing. So it's almost like, well, if he got me something for Valentine's Day, proving he loves me as I would expect love should look like, then I'm enough, right? So I'm always searching for clues in my environment. I mean, maybe what we're talking about is hypervigilance.
Yeah. Well, it's a certain, it's a strain, it's a particular flavor of hypervigilance. But what's interesting to recognize is that most of us have it.
I do think so. And it's like the stupidest and simplest examples I usually give to, like, when I talk to clients and I'm talking about this concept, and, I always use myself as the example. It's so stupid. But when I was in grad school and I'm walking down the hallways and there's this woman I really liked and we were friends, but not like besties, but friends. So it's still a little in that insecure phase where it's like, do you like me as much as I like you? And, we're not sure. And I looked up at her and she caught my eye and I gave her one of those big beaming, goofy Vanessa hellos, like my smile, like a horse, and I'm waving. And she kind of like looked at me and then just looked away. And I remember in that moment, like all the thoughts pinging. What did I do? Does she not like me? Oh, how embarrassing. And it was all looping. And I caught later that never once did I think, oh my God, is she okay?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what happened to my friend? Why would my friend, who's this, lovely person, not say hi to me? Did something happen to her family? Is she sick? Right? It was never about putting myself in the other person's shoes, because this particular style of what we could call pain body, but I think the bubble just gives such a good illusion, is so loud. It's like I'm in an echo chamber of my own fears and my own beliefs, and I'm desperate to shore up my identity as okay, right? So it's like, am I not enough? And then they have to become bad because, like, how dare that bitch, like it must be she's bad, right? And then no, it's really me. And it's like all pinging in this bubble. And that bubble itself kind of prevented me from making contact with direct experience, right? From making contact with reality. Most assuredly, I was not embodied, right? It wasn't like I was in my body going, how does that feel?
Right.
Does it feel like my friend's okay? Does it feel like, have I done, So I think you're right when you point to those two different levels of differentiation. It's like at the highest level, the most formless level, like, you're not even a separate self. So it's hilarious.
Right.
And at our most like accessible level of experience as beings with form and psychologies, it's like we're so busy shoring ourselves up that we can't connect. And in psychology, they talk about intersubjectivity, Have we talked about that term?
I
Do I ever talk
so.
about that with you? It's pretty interesting because it's considered a maturational level of development if you can achieve intersubjectivity, which is a long word for saying recognizing that the other people in front of you are subjective beings, not objects.
I'm sorry. I just think we're so funny. Yes. Okay.
We are so funny because when we're in that bubble, they are more like objects because everything about them is in reference to me. Are they responding the way I need them to? Do they like what I like? Do they want what I want? Are they doing what I think a good husband should do or a good friend should do? And it's like, okay, here's my other stupid example of this. When I was younger and I was married to my ex-husband, I wanted to buy a house. He didn't really like it. He said he wanted to live in some small janky apartment like he kind of always had. And he liked to keep a really low overhead, even though he wasn't cheap. He spent his money, but he kind of liked his like base nut to always be like super duper easy. And what I thought to myself was, he just doesn't know he wants a house.
I don't think you're the first person in the world to do I don't think he knows he wants what I want.
Right. I mean, because surely
I just have to show him that he wants what I want.
Because any human being would want what I want.
Obviously,
because what I want is delightful.
Is the best. It's the most important.
Best.
Yes.
And he must have just been wounded and just never realized that, like a house was available to him or he's scared, all those things that we tell stories. Women do it about men the most, but like all those stories that we tell about someone. Now that movement is objectifying him, imagining him to think and feel and want and prefer as I think and feel and want and prefer. When someone deviates from that, you think they're pathological. Like, well, what's the matter? Maybe they're just scared. Maybe they have a wound from their past. Maybe it's a pain body. Rather than imagining that they have a subjective experience that's just very different. And there's a different movement kind of inside of them that's authentic. So when you're in that bubble of pain, it's like that. It's like you're not able to really see and feel and connect with the inner subjectivity of that other person because you're stuck in this whirlwind of me.
Yeah, I think that I'm so glad that we're recording this one now because I feel like it plugs in really nicely to the holding space for not knowing. Because you're talking about, and the way that you talk about people as objects, that's when the label narcissistic becomes useful. It's not like we're defining ourselves as NPD. And I think it's very important that people know that's a real thing and it's a really different than this.
Yes, and I'm being a little flip.
Right. But there is this large gray scale of narcissism that we all exist on. And one of the ways is that we think we're people. Like, so most of us have some of it because almost all of us feel that way. Right. I think I'm a me. And then people can turn into objects because of it. And the episode we just did on holding space for not knowing is an important part of it. Like, it's an important part of unhooking from it because again, everything moves really fast. Conditioning moves very quickly along the coding program that has been written. And so one of the ways of slowing it down when we don't catch like, oh, I'm in the bubble, I'm making everything about me, is just holding space for not knowing. So first it's like the somatic feeling of, like in the example you gave of walking down the hallway and this friend does not greet you. It's the feeling of like, oh, like probably kind of gut punch, solar plexus punch, let down. And then what did I do wrong? Maybe they don't like me. I thought we were going to be friends. All the stories start running. And a nice little thing to interject, I feel like almost even before you catch that you are self-referencing everything to death, is to hold space for not knowing. Just to like infuse that into the air a little bit of like, I don't know. Maybe I don't, like you were saying, maybe she's having a terrible day. I wonder if she's okay. Maybe she was so caught up in her thoughts or didn't sleep well last night that she just literally didn't even see me. I don't know. And I feel like that's just a handy tool. Certainly I do it with my son a lot because he's 10 and like he's in that tweener stage where you start to come up more and more about like, it's fairly black and white thinking, right? So we'll be driving the car and someone will cut us off and be like, I can't believe they did that. Right? It's so simple. And I'm like, yeah, that was scary first. Second, like, we don't know what they did. It certainly wasn't, ha ha ha. I see them in that Prius. I'm going to cut them off. Like, it certainly wasn't intentional. I wouldn't use this many words when talking with him, but I'm basically trying to point out, like, God, maybe they had a really horrible, maybe they were up in the hospital all night last night with someone they love. I wouldn't also use something so dark with him as an example, but like, and they have not slept well. I don't know that person in that car pod that I didn't see and have never met and who cut me off.
Maybe there was a bee swarming them at their steering wheel.
Maybe they were just changing the radio station. It's nothing personal and who cares because we didn't have a car accident. But I have found that for me, as a 42-year-old person, and for him as a 10-year-old person, like, it's very handy for us to have these conversations about not knowing, about in reference to other people when we are creating the self-referencing bubble. Like, maybe it's not about you, you know, or certainly if you're dealing with challenging personalities at school or something, right? It's like, we don't know. We don't know what they're dealing with, which does not mean you need to be their buddy or make it better. It just means you get to not know and not make it about you. Like,
well, isn't it just the worst to make it about you? I mean, I'm not in a judgmental sense, in a sense of it's fucking painful.
Right. And we do
like
it. It's one of the ways we just make all our suffering. Yeah.
Oh, God.
When the weight of the world rests on your shoulders because you're not enough.
Right. Then we wonder why everyone has like trap tightness and soreness. It's like everybody's like, I know I'm not alone in it. We're piling it on. You know, this is just like a jump away from codependency, right? Because if my mom's, okay, this is right after Easter.
Vanessa and I are both feeling a little post-Easter familial angst.
We both just spent a week with our beautiful families. And so let's say my mom's, you know, okay, here's the simplest of examples. My mom's a very good cook, and that makes her very fussy when she goes to restaurants. So it was like, we go to a restaurant the first night and it's Italian. And I can't even really eat Italian food anymore. So like, but I brought them because I have like kids to worry about. My mom's very fussy and my diet, whatever. We go to this Italian restaurant. She takes a bite and she's like, and my mom's got the worst poker face in the history. So she's like, meh. Like you could just see she hates what's happening right now. Oh, this octopus. You know?
You're cracking me up.
Now, my mom doesn't like the food. Okay, that's a very simple fact, right? But in my mind, it's like, she doesn't like Austin. She's mad because I moved from Miami to Austin. I didn't do a good enough job of sightseeing. I didn't set up the restaurants right. I'm not a good enough daughter, right? Like there's these like, almost like, like if her meh to the food could make an echo in like a cave, it's bouncing back with all of these like other voices, right? Which is really how a pain body kind of looks and feels. And it's all just like pinging around. Now I was able, because thank God I've released a lot of this kind of activity, I was able to just take a breath and be like, she doesn't like her food.
Right.
And I don't know why. And then maybe all of those things are involved and it doesn't matter. It's certainly not that I'm a bad daughter that she doesn't like her food, but you know, it was these little pings. But part of why I even talk about this concept, one is to understand ourselves, like to understand that echo chamber. But the other is to understand them, because my mom also has a very dense bubble and spent most of the week. She's like defending herself against something that no one ever was talking about or attacking her for. Like, you know, that kind of thing where she's like, you know, I had a right to worry about that. And you're like, oh, wait, what are you talking about? Like, I didn't tell you don't have a right to worry about that. You know, it's like, and it's constant. And then, you know, you get annoyed or frustrated. I get annoyed or frustrated very easily in those moments. And it's been years of me having to realize, like, she's just stuck in her own bubble of pain. And she can't hear me and she can't see me. And the oranges I'm throwing her are coming out as limes. And that's just part of what's happening. And it doesn't mean she doesn't love me. It doesn't mean she doesn't value me. It doesn't mean all sorts of things I could fill it in as. It's just she's stuck in her own pain bodies and it's circulating. And the air is so stale in there, isn't it?
Yeah. And when you started talking about that with your mom, like I started crying, which means it's juicy to talk about because it is like it's so we can have a narcissistic pain bubble about deconstructing the narcissistic pain bubble, right? Like, isn't it so interesting that I can see this about myself?
Yeah.
But when we talk about it in relationship to the people that we love, it's funny, like it lets us love them more in a funny way, or our love which is already there. It's not like it's a bigger quantity, but it's that it can shine through more. And at the exact same time, it shines through more because you realize you don't get to do anything about it.
Yeah.
Like you can't, right. You can't pop their bubble. You can't fix it for them. You can't make sure that they get the translation the way it was intended. And I spent a lot of my week watching the bubbles. I'm so glad we're talking about this because it was so on my mind. And with my mom, hi, she doesn't listen, but there was this one of my mom's very, very dense pain bubbles is if I'm not helping and if I'm not needed, I don't exist. And I'm a terrible waste of space. And watching her about everything, it's really funny. It's hilarious. And it's hilarious in myself too, right? Because people can try so hard to help that what they wind up doing, if it's not in alignment, which it's not, if it's coming from pain, is they create all kinds of extra static, all kinds of chaos and irritation.
Super unhelpful.
Right.
Chaos.
It's not at all helpful, but they think they're being helpful. It's really funny to watch. So like a simple one, so funny. My brother and sister-in-law live down the street from a beach, Alki Beach in Seattle, where they have tons of beach volleyball. It's like the only part of Seattle that has this funny Southern California beach culture in gloomy Seattle. And my mom decides they're going to get into beach volleyball. They don't play volleyball. They're going to, because how awesome. They live a block from beach volleyball. So, and my mom's not at all athletic or inclined this way, but she just has this vision, right, of their amazing lives playing beach volleyball. Yeah. Because their new house. Yeah. So she starts figuring out, how do you rent the balls and what are the leagues and what are your friends? What friends might you get engaged in this? They have no interest in playing beach volleyball, either one of them. It's not like they've thrown her a bone like, I wonder where you do get the balls. Like it's not that.
Right.
And then I see her later. We run into a friend of my sister-in-law's who's also not a beach volleyball player. And my mom takes her aside. They do beach volleyball here. And we're like standing right in front of the nets. It would be so fun. Don't you think it would be fun? Maybe you could get together with them. Maybe you could all do beach volleyball. And I'm just watching it, Now, in the past, I would want to intervene. I would want to intervene in a way that makes my brother and sister-in-law and my sister-in-law's friend feel better because get them off.
Right.
Get her off their back
from this situation.
From the controlling, the puppeteering. And then I would also want my mom to feel better. Like, gee, you really are. Because all she needs to feel like she's alive is I'm helping. Isn't it great? Like she wants to be the one that ignites their new passion in beach volleyball. I did this. I helped you connect to this, right? It's so crazy. And it's of course not helpful because it's agitation for everyone, including my mother, because the agitation is trying to make a thing happen that nobody wants to have happen.
Well, and moving from pain is just agitating,
it's
period.
Just pain, right? Like she's just reinforcing the echo in her cave is saying, I'm trying to help. And then it says all these other things. Why doesn't anyone ever listen to me? I have good ideas. I'm trying to help. Nobody ever lets me help. All these things. Right. It's just like
no one's appreciating it.
And so in the moments when I can watch it and just watch it, I have so much love for her. It's like my heart breaks wide open. I get past the point of being annoyed and maddened by her puppeteering type codependent helper thing. And I'm just like, oh my God, it is so painful to live in that shaped bubble, that has that sound reverberating around. Like you said, the air is so stale in there, and you love this person, and you know that they, like you and everyone on the planet, are just made of basic goodness. They don't have to earn their right to exist. They're here, so they are loved. They're here, so they are good already. They don't have to do anything to earn their place, but they're endlessly trying to earn their place and adapt what it sounds like in the bubble by manipulating things. But it doesn't work that way, because you got to let go of the reins for anything to start to sound different and for the bubble to pop. Mm-hmm. And so it's like I can move towards her with all of this love because I see it in her, because I see it in myself, and I see how beautifully fucking hilarious it is that we think we're doing something when we try to manipulate circumstances from pain. Mm-hmm. We're not. We're just adding more noise to an already noisy place,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even just like watching myself this week, I was exhausted. I mean, I had a really great week, but I was exhausted. And I realized I wasn't exhausted really just from the amount of physical activity we were doing. I'm still a bit recovering. So, I watch what I output on a regular basis, but it wasn't really that. It was like, I was exhausted from worrying about making everybody happy. And is everyone having a good time? This kind of maniacal drive that is one of my pain bodies. And so we have a lot of empathy, a lot of compassion for it. I feel the same way as what you were saying, Brooke. And I guess, though, where it's the most challenging for me when I see it in someone else is I can have compassion and then I still want to fix it.
Yeah.
Desperately, and that's the biggest challenge I face.
One of the things that's been challenging for me is what's left in the place of not fixing, right? Because I'm a fixer too. I'm my mother's daughter.
You do? Yeah, compassion. Yeah, because it's now fifth time, sixth time. Oh, Jesus! Now what?
I know. Well, this is probably fodder for another episode. But it's getting used to feeling different inside of your own skin, to having a different response to conditioning, which feels incredibly foreign from what you would normally do. So for me, in the beginning, it's a lot of not much, right? It's a lot of just witnessing and compassion. I don't get to, in the example of my mother, I don't get to move towards if there's no space for me to move towards. And there is no space for me to move towards. With a friend or somebody else who comes to me and says, I'm heartbroken. This is what's going on in my life. There's all this room to move towards, not to fix, but to move towards, where we can engage and literally just have a loving, I was going to say conversation, doesn't even need to be words though, a loving time together where I get to love them and they get to feel loved and they get to love me, the end. And that takes whatever form it takes in terms of what words are spoken or what words are not spoken. But when a person is in a very dense bubble, a very thick conditioned space, and certainly if we've been running our programming without any attempt to disrupt it for 70 years, those programs, it intensifies. And I watch, one of the reasons why I'm on this path, honestly, is watching my parents and my parents' friends who I grew up to kind of close. So I watched them grow up, and also just because that's sort of my nature, and just watching them harden into their harder aspects of themselves. Yeah. And all of the other more subtle, more nuanced, more live, more loving, more delighted, more joyful parts have kind of gone away. And it's almost like just the deepest ridges are left. And that tends to be the harder, more painful conditioning. So it is challenging because it's like I can see that I don't get to manipulate anything, and I love you because I have so much empathy and compassion. And also like, okay, I'm this stranger in a strange land where I'm not the person who used to rush in to try and change the way your bubble sounded because I know that I can't.
Right. Well, that was just your self-referencing bubble bumping up against her self-referencing bubble.
And I'm like, oh,
we're both not connecting in real space and time.
Right. Yeah.
We're like in the past, we're in the future, but we're not connecting in real space and time because the direct experience would just be compassion.
Right.
Maybe there's sadness, maybe you'll have a direct experience of anger, but that too would pass if you were letting go of whatever belief systems were driving it.
Right.
I think so what happened for me was I went to grad school for psychology. I started to learn about these ideas. I started to learn about these ideas in like my couples counseling class, where we started to talk about intersubjectivity. I'm like, oh my God, I had this like epiphany. Like I was making this poor man get a house when he didn't want a house, right? And like once that awareness kind of got planted, it started to grow. Like I started to observe. And then I don't know, I just stopped taking things so personally. Right. And I was doing therapy and I was doing awareness practices and all those other things. What I've noticed when I work with people is something very similar. It's like if this is part of their patterning, if they're caught in their own bubble, they come in and everything that's up in their lives they think has to do with them. If their career is not right, if their money is not right. The funny thing is, of course, to some degree, it does have to do with us. But then again, it doesn't.
It's always the both. Yeah.
We do create our own realities. But again, not everything is about you, this solid ego identity that you think yourself to be, right? In fact, I think the narcissistic bubble of pain, I dare say, is probably a dissociated, disembodied aspect of self that lives mostly in a cognitive realm.
Yeah.
It's like it's only really living in the realm of theory and idea and
well
story.
Said. I want you to drop a mic after that one.
Booyah! Sorry, I just screamed in all of your ears.
Worth it.
Got excited. So I think I start to notice they come in and they're talking about their friends and they're talking about their family and it's like, I'm not getting enough from them. My needs aren't getting met. My mom's not recognizing my restaurant choice and the foods. And it's all these kinds of stories. And then somehow organically, we don't even really focus on this. All of a sudden, they're telling me stories differently. My friend didn't call me back. And I was wondering what could have happened to her. I feel so bad for people. People are going through so much these days. And it's like this beautiful organic shift that happens where all of a sudden they're released from that prison of taking things so personally. And, to be really clear about it, there's probably levels. Like you talked about thicker bubbles and thinner bubbles. Like it's not like enlightened. I'm not a person and
sure,
I don't reference myself.
We don't need to go all the way out there.
I reference myself plenty, but it's like greater and greater levels of freedom, like as if the bubble's getting larger and larger and there's more space for other people and other direct experience. And so I don't know, I always talk a lot about, I feel like the moment we believe we get space to exist, kind of like what you were describing, like you don't have to earn your right to be here. My conditioning was very thick around having to earn my right to be here. So this is also kind of my lens. But when you work with someone, a significant other, whether it's Rolfing or energy work or coaching or whatever it is, therapy, and you have space to exist, and then you, in that movement, make more space for yourself. Like you start to become aware, you give space to your feelings, you pay attention to yourself. That alone is sort of the alchemical agent. Maybe then you become a little more present, a little more in your body. And then maybe you're touching reality in a little bit more of a direct way. And then maybe as that happens, you just stop self-referencing to the degree that you were, and you stop personalizing in relative degrees. I don't know. Does that make sense to you? It's like I've observed the process. I just don't know how it's working, to be honest.
And I think that once people become more subjects than objects, like as this alchemical process takes place, you start to realize that non-dualistic thing again of like, it's actually, if you just hold space for the possibility, maybe it's not about you, you realize it's actually never about you. And also it is sometimes, no, but like in this particular example, people are going to see us through their own lenses, which we don't get to control or manipulate. So we're going to be whatever we need to pop up as for them in that particular moment. Whether it's the selfish bitch or the head in the clouds, I wish they were less out of it. Who knows, you know? So I'm not saying that this means we get to like get off the hook for being assholes. Certainly patterns of how people behave around us allows for a reflection back where we're looking in a mirror and we're like, I tend to always trigger this in people. Right. And we get to unravel that. But I would say that like when we start to see that people are subjects in their own lives and not the object that I'm putting on, they must think I'm not interesting enough or whatever, we realize like, just like me, they have all of these competing narratives, all these competing identifiers and histories and trajectories and storylines, basically. And so I don't know. And I think that there's something, I think if we could all just choose one mantra forever and ever, it would be, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful statement, actually. It frees you from so much suffering, and it frees you from trying to manipulate your environment and other people as objects in a way that just causes more suffering. Mm-hmm. And so just the simple, like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with them. I don't know what's going on with me.
Yeah. How about staying present? Just like me is also very powerful. You know, it's like, I think it's Pema Chodron has that
Pema
meditation.
Chodron uses that, just like me. I still love doing that when I'm in the subway or in Grand Central, because it's like such a stream of people everywhere, such diverse people. And
it's like, you know, they have pain, they want love, just like me.
Just
you know,
like
it's
me.
like,
and especially if I catch myself being judgy, which I almost never, I'm just joking. I do it all the time. But it's great because it's like, because we all do it all the time, but to catch yourself doing it, catching yourself in the act, that's a great phrase. I love to sprinkle in that moment, just like me. You know, it's like, oh God, that person's so shouty. Like, let's say I'm in my Rolfing office, which is in downtown New Haven. I'll hear someone having an argument on the street. Oh my God. So shouty, so loud, so rude, so aggressive, just like me. And then I can catch all the time. Well, first of all, I'm being really aggressive in my judgments towards them right now, you know? And so not to do it in a shaming way, but it's actually, if you can get it from a place where it feels like relief. Right. Like, oh yeah, we all get to just exist.
Like, well, we get to be human.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so we all get to just be humans. We get to all be complex. We get to all go through our stuff.
Pain bodies, apparently.
Yeah.
I think about like this bubble of pain when we're talking about it, how it feels in my system. It's like, you know, in Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche's book, the Shambhala, The Way of the Warrior, how he talks about like the cave. Do you ever read that one?
I don't remember that one.
It's his like little one.
I've read it. I don't remember the cave.
Okay.
Maybe I have to revisit this one.
It's really the whole premise of it is like, we all live in these caves and they're warm and they're cozy and we see the light of day, but we're scared to go out into it. And that's really his self-referencing bubble of pain. Mm-hmm. It's like we live with the ego and the I am Vanessa, and I do not want to escape that on some level. You know, the unknown, the expansiveness, the freedom of stepping out into the light of day is too threatening to me. It's too vulnerable. And so I stay in this cave, but over time the cave becomes dank and stanky and sweaty, right? You can imagine it's like filth, but you know, I try to make it pretty and I put candles and I paint it, but it's really still like this kind of dank, hot nasty cave after a while, right? Because you're in your own stink. And yet most humans are afraid to go out into that light of day. And I think about that with like our bubbles of pain, which really are just our identity projects. Yeah. Like all of these things, our pain bodies, our bubbles of pain. Yeah, they're programming, but that reflexive movement to make it about me is an identity project. It's like it's shoring up that I am separate and I am Vanessa, and Vanessa is good or bad based on this experience. And so these identity projects are the cave, and they're the way that we perceive ourselves as safe. It's cozy. It's comfy. You know, I'm nappy in the cave. It may smell, but I'm going to try to make it prettier. I'm going to paint a window on it, right?
I'm going to Febreze the hell out of that shit.
Yeah. I'm going to like, you know, and we do that with our lives. Like we dress it up a little bit. We tell a little bit of a different story, you know, but the idea is we want to step out of these bubbles so we can have direct experience of like, breath and expansion. But I think when I begin to understand that, I have a lot of empathy for myself. B, I start to cultivate a little more courage to like take that risk to see things as unknown, you know, take that risk to say something that does feel vulnerable or do something that does feel really vulnerable, to feel my body more, even though, you know, feelings are intense for me. And it helps me really have a lot more compassion for people because no one wants to feel stuck in pain. No one wants to take things personally. Like it's a very painful state. I know many of you relate to this. I know it and I still live it sometimes, but I lived it like on a very every single moment basis when I was younger. And it's excruciating to be stuck there. So I think, you know, as usual, compassion for others, like, you know, awareness is, I just posted this on social media today on whatever our post was, but like awareness is a beautiful thing. It's the alchemical agent, right? Like as we see, so things can unfold. But if you don't have understanding and compassion with that awareness, like understanding of like a little bit about human nature, a little bit about the ego, a little bit about what makes us move, and then the compassion that's born out of understanding that, well, then that awareness just gets co-opted again by the self-referencing ego. And now we're judging ourselves. We're judging others, right? So Buddhism, they say, like wisdom and compassion are like two wings of a bird. And wisdom is awareness. And, you know, if you have one without the other, there's something off.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great visual to wrap it up on.
Thank you so much for listening to today's show. The show notes, including any resources we mentioned, always live at blissandgrit.com. Go ahead over to the website and scroll down and you'll see each episode's separate post, and we put the resources right in there. You can also come hang with us on social media. Instagram and Facebook are where we're most readily available, and we're Bliss and Grit at both of those spots. And we've been loving your questions and your commentary and engagement. It's been really fun for us. If you want to support us and the show, you can write us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or on our Facebook page, which again is Bliss and Grit. It's really fun hearing from all of you, and it also helps other people to find the show. If technology isn't your thing, but you're enjoying the show, well, then just tell your friends who you think it might resonate with. Huge gratitude to all of you who've already written reviews. We are really so honored. Here's one that someone posted on our Facebook page. It's from Sasha Sigel. She says, "These amazing human beings graciously share their wisdom and experiences. I listen to them on the train, at work, while I'm sick in bed, and can't stop talking about them. I've made some big connections and had major aha moments through their guidance. Thank you for everything." Oh my gosh. Thank you, Sasha, so much. And thanks to all of you who've written reviews and all of you who've listened. One last note, we do have some things in the works for all of you, some classes and some meetups. So if you're interested, go over to blissandgrit.com, sign up to stay in touch for all these goodies that are coming up with your email address. Okay, thanks again, everyone, and we'll be back at you next week.